Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of A.V.Astronomy. Hope everybody is doing well this evening. I wanted to do a video on my latest processing techniques for processing astrophotography images. Nothing really special about what I'm doing here, but I'm taking the best of three different programs here, in my opinion, and have come up with what I believe to be a pretty quick and efficient way to process images. I mean, let's just face it, most people don't want to spend 3 and 4 and 5 hours processing images. Some people do, and if you're one of those that's something you take pride and enjoyment in, that more power to you. That's awesome. I'm not one of those people. I'm guessing there's a lot more others out there like me as well that would rather just be able to process an image within a reasonable amount of time and come up with a good result. So that's what I've put together here. You're going to start with Deep Sky Stacker, which is a free software that you can get here, okay, at this link. And once you have that downloaded and installed, you're going to want to start that program. So I'm going to use the Andromeda Galaxy as an example. So let's go into Astro Photos. Here we go, Andromeda Galaxy RAW. Alright, so the first thing you want to do is load all your RAW files, Control A. And as I've mentioned in my previous video here, where I discuss using Deep Sky Stacker, I only use flats and bias files. So load your RAW files just as I did there. Then load your flat files. And then load your bias files. Once you have those loaded, you're going to hit check all, register, check pictures. Okay, go to advanced, set the start. You can adjust this. Just you want to detect. I'd shoot for 100 to 200 stars, and you can hit this compute button and see how many stars it's able to grab. 1,300. That's plenty. So we're good there. Hit on stacking parameters. You want this to be on standard. I dither, so which you should too. If you're not dithering, you should be dithering. If you're not sure what that is, that's small adjustments made in the position of the mount done through software like PhD or APT that helps tremendously with reducing noise. But in doing so, it helps to use this option here, enable 2x drizzle. Lights, I do kappa sig, 5 iterations, flats average, bias average, alignment automatic, and save as a TIFF file. Output, make sure you have these check marked appropriately, just as I do here. Okay, use all available processors. And that's it. You're going to hit OK. Hit OK again, and it's going to run through and start stacking all your images. Now once you're done, you'll have a stacked image. Now that you've done that, we're going to pull up Astro Pixel Processor. And just a brief comment about this program. I love this program. Overall, I think is a fantastic program. The stacking part of the program, I'm not too excited about. You do, at least for me, and I've seen other people comment about this online, but you do wind up with some really crazy artifacts when you stack with Astro Pixel Processor, and it may be a setting thing I need to adjust, but Deep Sky Stacker does such an excellent job with this. It just doesn't make sense to fumble with this when I've got something that works. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. That's my mentality. But anyway, we would load the image here. So we got to set our working directory, Astro Photos, Andromeda. Let's go to stacked. Okay, and click open. That's your working directory. And first thing you're going to do here, this is what I like about this interface. On this side here, everything is numbered in order. Now if you're stacking and registering with Astro Pixel Processor, you'll start with 1 and go to 2, 3, and so on. But since we've already stacked in Deep Sky Stacker, we're just going to load that file, which is the light file, okay? And click cancel, and this is asking you if you are using basically a mono camera in this situation, which I did. This is a DSLR, and it was all in one session. So hit cancel on both of those. Now, that's loaded. We can get a preview by double clicking down here on this image, and straight out of Deep Sky Stacker and just previewed here. That's what we got so far, with some pre-stretch already done in here. We're going to make some adjustments, but what we're going to skip over to, we're going to go all the way to 9 and skip over to Batch Modify. Okay, well, we're going to kind of select the area we want to edit of this picture. So click yes, and then we're going to select the area we want to crop. So I'm going to say right about here looks good. That works for me. Crop OK. And it's going to ask you, how do you want to save the file? TIFF, sRGB workspace, 16 bits, and OK. Alright, we're now going to go to that image. Next one down. Loads the preview for you. Boom, there's our cropped image. Now, I want to rotate this thing. I always feel like Andromeda in this position looks like it's upside down, which I know that's just personal preference, but it looks upside down to me. So we're going to change the angle of this. We're going to flip this 180 degrees. And there we go. Now, I flipped that, I can kind of see where I'd like to make some additional adjustments to how I have framed this. So I'm going to go OK here. And you know, each step here, it takes a little moment. I mean, I've got a fairly new, you know, I've got a Ryzen 7 8 core, 16 gigs of RAM, pretty decent system here, but you know, some of these steps do take a little bit of time. Nothing too lengthy. Alright, let's save that. Alright, let's resize this. As far as, I'm sorry, let's reframe this. Recompose our image. And let me just go ahead and point out, notice how well this program stretches these images. You know, typically when you stretch in Photoshop with the Andromeda, the core just gets blown out, and depending on how you exposed it anyway, it may already be blown out in the first place. But this program does such a good job of auto stretching, and we'll make some tweaks here to this stretch in a minute, but just that just, when I saw that, I was so impressed by that. Alright, so let's change the crop here. I want to get this more centered looking, so I'm going to do, yeah, about right there. So we're going to crop that. Alright, let's take a look at that. Load that preview. Every time you save the image, it saves a new modified version. Whatever the last step you did, whatever the last step you performed, it adds it to the workflow and saves it. Now there we go. I feel like that's a pretty nice composition right there. Now we're going to, it says we can correct vignetting. It's really not a whole lot of vignetting here. I'm just going to go straight to remove light pollution. So it's going to neutralize the background. Boom. And then we're going to select areas where there's some off color. Areas that look to be suffering from some light pollution. And we're just going to rock with that right there. Calculate. And there we go. Now the reds, we're going to remove those, but that looks pretty darn good to me just right out the gate. I'm pretty satisfied with that. The gradients are gone. The light pollution is gone. So I'm going to hit OK and save. Alright, let's load that picture. And there we are. Now, honestly, this is about as far as I go with Astropixel processor. And if you have not, I'll do a couple adjustments here in stretch, but let me just say the program itself is very reasonable. A renter's license, which is basically an annual license to use the program, it's something like $50-60 US. It's very reasonable, and for what it does, and it can do so much more than I use it for. But for what I'm comfortable using this program for, I'm very pleased with. But let's look at a couple different stretching options. There's several different, so that doesn't really do a whole lot, just made it overall brighter. Let's see what happens here. And it brightens the core a bit. Now that did bring out some more detail in this area. I kind of like that. That core is getting a little hot though. Let's bring it down here and see what happens. Let's compare. Actually, I like this one better. 2.5% base. The core wasn't really that much brighter. So I'm going to go with this right here and save. and I'm going to call this Andromeda Stack APP YouTube Demo. Save it as a TIFF, hit OK, sRGB, 16-bit file, and that will conclude what I do in AstroPixel processor with this image here. So now we're going to close this out and we're going to load this up into Photoshop. Alright, once we get Photoshop up and going here, load that image. Photos, Andromeda, was under stacked. So APP YouTube, here we go. Alright. So I like to, composition is always what I like to usually start with. So I'm going to go ahead and crop out some areas that I just don't really care for. Bring that up a little better. Alright. I'm going to duplicate the layer. And let's look at levels here. There's a little bit of tweaking we can do, but let's do a threshold layer first. Image, adjustments, threshold. Just to find the darkest point on this picture. And it looks like this area up here is going to be the darkest. And that's what we're going to select as our black point. And you can trash that, and now your dark point is sampled. Alright, Control J to duplicate the layer. Let's go into levels and watch these numbers here. Okay, you want these numbers to match up as best you can. So if we bring this down to, let's say, let's go 19 right there. I don't want to clip too much data. Let's check the green channel and also bring that down to 19. This helps maintain a color balance, guys. 19 on that one, and then on the blue channel, just a nudge. There we go. On the blue channel. Sometimes you gotta eyeball this, guys. This is definitely favoring the blue scale here. We're gonna clip a little bit of the blue just to neutralize this a little bit better. Okay, right there. All right, let's flatten that out. Control J again. No need to do any curves adjustments. You've done all the stretching you need to do to this thing. Let's just make sure that the gradients here have been completely neutralized. So let's go to Gradient Exterminator. Medium, medium is what I always start out with. Detail, medium, aggressiveness, medium. It's a good starting point. And if it kind of jacks up the galaxy or your main area of interest, then I can show you a little something we do to help reduce that. See how that did there? So let's undo that, and we're going to select with the lasso this area here around the Andromeda Galaxy. Okay, select inverse, and now we're going to run that same filter, medium, medium, and it shouldn't mess with the galaxy or the area around the galaxy like it did previously. Much better. Okay, so let's deselect and see what we got here. Okay, so there's your before and after. That bluish hue that was there is gone. Okay, lavender. That's why I like a Gradient Exterminator. It just does a really good job of neutralizing gradients. Alright, so at this point I'd like to go into Camera Raw Filter and make some adjustments here. The highlights are looking okay. Let's just see what happens when we darken this a little bit. So yeah, I don't want to mess with that too much. I certainly don't want to brighten it. We could dim it down a touch. Shadows. You know, just how intense you want to make it. I kind of like bringing that down a bit. Kind of intensifies, makes the subject pop, the galaxy pop a little bit more from the background. Whites. Again, this is to taste. Ooh. Just tame that just a little bit. Bring that back a bit, and let's look at blacks. That's obviously way too much. Let's bring that down just a little bit on blacks, okay? Texture. This increases noise, by the way. So, I mean, you can do this, but you're going to increase noise. Soften it too much, you lose your detail. So, I don't do a whole lot with texture, usually. Clarity kind of does the same thing, but it's more subtle. You can really bring out the detail in the wispy areas right in here of your subject. Dehaze, not a whole lot of that needed right here. I'm going to leave that alone. And here's where we can get a little color boost. We're going to boost the vibrance a bit and saturation just a tad. Alright, so here's what we're working with right here at this point, which is already looking pretty darn good. Now, I'd like to do a little bit of a color boost here, so what I do is I go into, press Control U for saturation and color, and just boost this up until it looks pleasing but not crazy super saturated. We're going to go 30 here. I'm going to hit OK. We're going to add a Gaussian blur to this to soften the noise that comes from doing that. 2 pixels usually works pretty well. Okay, and then we're going to click the background layer, bring up curves, Control M, and we're going to set this to 245. That one stays at 255, and then click right here in the middle to make sure this is 128, 128. Okay, boom, there we go. And that adds that color boost without adding the noise. It neutralizes the noise that would come from that color boost. Look at these nice colors you get with the stars too. Alright, let's flatten that out. Back in Camera Raw Filter. This is without even making any noise adjustments. Let's go to the noise reduction. Let's zoom in here and see what we're looking at noise-wise. This picture here has got some luminance and some color noise. So let's take out some of that luminance noise. And let's take out that color noise. You can adjust that. There we go. That certainly reduced it. You see the difference? We go back here. You see all the color noise right in here. Watch what happens when I drag this over to about 60 or 70. It really softens that up and neutralizes a lot of that noise. So we're going to do that. Get rid of, to help reduce a lot of the color noise there. That's much better. It's still there. Can't get rid of it completely, but it's certainly at a respectable level, I'd say. And flatten that out there. Now, you can stop here if you'd like, but this is one of those images that to me really benefits from the HDR filter. You go to Image, Adjustments, HDR Toning. Sorry, HDR Toning. And here we can really tweak some of the exposure, contrast in a way that really boost this picture. Now right out the gate, obviously the highlights are blown out, so we need to tone that back. Let's tone that core down. We want that core nice and soft. There we go. Exposure is a little hot. Let's tone that down a little bit. There we go. Right about there. Let's see, let's play around with gamma a little bit. No, let's go the other direction. We want a little more contrast boost. There we go. Vibrance, we can boost that up a little bit, get some vibrance boost. Saturation's looking pretty good to me. Detail on plus 30 is looking pretty good there. Strength at 0.5. I'm pretty happy with that, guys. I don't think I'd do much more there. This is, again, personal preference, but there we go. HDR toning, you get a nice, smooth, soft color boost on this. And this was without doing any minimizing of the stars. I kind of like the stars in it. I know it's kind of busy, but I like how this comes out with the stars just popping all around it. And there's enough detail and color here to punch through some of that. But there you go, guys. Basically, in less than 30 minutes, you can have a processed image, stacked, registered, processed, stretched, looking really darn good, and do it in about a half an hour. 30, if your first time going around with some of this stuff, there's a learning curve, of course, but once you've done a few images and you get some experience under your belt, there's no reason why you can't do something and produce a respectable result within 30-45 minutes using this method. Now, for me, there's still some color noise here and there that I'd like to selectively work on and make some adjustments to, but overall, I'm really pleased with that. But anyway, that's kind of my latest run through on how I process my images, whether they're nebulas, galaxies. I run them through Deep Sky Stacker, pull it straight into Astropixel Processor for stretching, color correction, light pollution removal, and then I load them into Photoshop for gradient reduction, any other outstanding, vignetting and of that sort of thing. And of course, I use the Camera Raw filter to make adjustments with noise, vibrance, color, and that sort of thing. And if you really want it to pop and get the most out of your image, and not with all images, but with many, the HDR toning is a nice way to make your images pop that much more. Well guys, that concludes our video for the evening. If you enjoyed this video, you felt like you got some useful information out of it, please give me a thumbs up. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button and like so you don't miss out on any future videos that'll be covering gear, imaging session, and tutorials. Until next time, clear skies.